Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a pretty big question.
Hmm.
Why is arresting someone on an international warrant, for the most serious crimes, why is that so incredibly difficult sometimes?
Right. It seems like it should be straightforward, but it's anything but.
Exactly. We've got some great sources here that break down the International Criminal Court, the ICC, how it issues warrants, and some really telling case studies.
Yeah, the goal today is really to unpack the legal stuff, sure, but also the political hurdles. Why these arrests get so contested.
Okay, let's start with the basics. ICC, what's its core mission?
Well, it was set up to prosecute the absolute worst crimes. Genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression.
The big one
The
is.
big ones, yeah. And crucially, it's a court of last resort. It only steps in if national systems are unwilling or, genuinely unable to prosecute.
It goes after individuals, right, not states.
Correct. Individuals. And another key point, Article 27 of its statute, says your official position, like being a head of state, doesn't grant you immunity before the ICC itself. That's important.
Okay, so how does a case even get to the ICC? What triggers their involvement?
There are basically three main ways. A member state can refer a situation.
Okay.
The UN Security Council can refer one, or the ICC prosecutor can initiate an investigation themselves, proprio motu.
And state consent is usually needed.
Generally, yes, for the first and third ways. Either the state where the crime occurred or the state of the accused's nationality needs to be an ICC member, or they have to explicitly accept the court's jurisdiction for that specific situation.
But the Security Council referrals are different.
They're the exception. A UNSC referral under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter can give the ICC jurisdiction even over crimes committed in non-member states without that state's consent. That's powerful.
Got it. So once they have jurisdiction, how does an arrest warrant happen?
The prosecutor has to apply to the pretrial chamber of the judges. They need to show reasonable grounds to believe that, one, an ICC crime was committed, and two, that the specific person's arrest is necessary, maybe to ensure they appear at trial or stop them committing more crime.
And then the member states are supposed to arrest the person.
Legally, yes. States parties to the Rome Statute have a treaty obligation to cooperate fully with the court's requests, including arrests.
But there's always a but.
Right. But the ICC has absolutely no police force of its own. Zero enforcement mechanism. It relies completely, 100%, on states to actually execute those warrants.
And that brings us to the immunity issue again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially for heads of state.
Exactly. It's a major sticking point.
Yeah.
We mentioned Article 27, no immunity before the ICC.
Right.
But then there's Article 98. It creates a potential conflict. It says the ICC shouldn't ask a member state to act inconsistently with its other international law obligations regarding state or diplomatic immunity of a person from a third state, usually a non-member state.
So the ICC says no immunity here, but tells member states, don't violate immunity rules you might owe to non-members. That sounds complicated.
It is complicated, and it's led to huge disagreements.
Well,
Let's look at Omar al-Bashir, the former president of Sudan.
okay, yeah. The warrants for Darfur, what happened there?
So the situation was referred by the UN Security Council, meaning Sudan's non-membership wasn't a barrier to jurisdiction. Warrants were issued for genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes.
And Sudan argued he had immunity.
Sudan and some other states, yes. They argued he had head of state immunity under customary international law. But the ICC appeals chamber ruled that this kind of immunity doesn't apply for these international crimes before an international court like the ICC, especially following a Security Council referral.
So the ICC said arrest him, but...
But he traveled quite a bit, including to several ICC member states. And they didn't arrest him. South Africa was a big example. Their courts ordered his arrest, but the government allowed him to leave. The ICC found multiple states non-compliant.
Wow. So the legal ruling met political reality.
Pretty much. It shows the clash between the ICC's legal position on immunity and states maybe prioritizing diplomacy or citing those Article 98 concerns.
What about Saif al-Islam Gaddafi in Libya? Another Security Council referral, right?
Yes, same trigger. Warrant issued. But Libya itself challenged the case, saying, hey, we're investigating him ourselves. It's called an admissibility challenge.
Did the ICC buy that?
No. The ICC found that at the time, Libya wasn't genuinely able or willing to carry out the investigation and prosecution, so they rejected Libya's challenge and kept demanding his surrender.
But he was never transferred?
Never. He was held by militias within Libya for years. So that case shows a different problem. Even with a UNSC referral and clear ICC jurisdiction, a lack of state capacity or internal chaos can completely prevent enforcement.
Okay, fast forward to now. We have the recent warrants related to Ukraine and the situation in Palestine, Putin, and then Netanyahu and Gallant.
Right. These really highlight the ongoing struggles. For Putin, Russia isn't an ICC member. The jurisdiction comes from Ukraine accepting ICC jurisdiction over crimes on its territory. For the warrants requested for Netanyahu and gallant Israel isn't a member either. Jurisdiction there is based on Palestine being an ICC member state, covering alleged crimes in Palestinian territory, including Gaza.
And the immunity issue pops up again.
Absolutely. For Putin, it's the head of state immunity argument for a leader of a non-member state. We saw Mongolia, an ICC member, explicitly cite Putin's immunity when discussing a potential visit, referencing Article 98 concerns.
And for the Israeli officials,
Similar issues arise, plus intense debate about the ICC's jurisdiction over the Palestinian territories in the first place, which Israel disputes. These cases are testing the absolute limits of the ICC's reach and how states react.
so how do states generally react? It seems like a mix of cooperation and pushback.
It's definitely a mix. States often face this internal tension, between their legal duty to the ICC under the treaty and political calculations, diplomatic relations, national interests.
And the ICC gets criticized.
Oh, constantly. Accusations of bias, focusing too much on Africa initially, now maybe overreaching with powerful states or their allies. The different global reactions to the Putin versus the Netanyahu-Gallant warrants also fuel debates about double standards.
So at the end of the day, the ICC's power seems quite fragile.
It really relies on state cooperation. Its effectiveness hinges entirely on the political will of nations, especially powerful ones, to back it up. And that it often seems lacking when things get politically sensitive.
So while the ICC aims high accountability for the worst crimes, its actual ability to enforce that is deeply tied to state cooperation, sovereignty concerns, immunity debates, and raw politics.
Yeah, what's fascinating, I think, is watching this evolution. International law is trying to assert itself through the ICC, particularly this idea that head of state immunity doesn't shield you from prosecution for core international crimes. It's a bold legal claim.
But its practical effect is still up in the air.
Depends entirely on whether states will actually act on it, arrest people, and surrender them. That's the billion-dollar question.
Which leaves us with a huge thought to chew on. Can a system like the ICC, designed for global justice, truly work effectively when it doesn't have its own police force and its authority keeps getting challenged by the very states it relies on?
It's the central dilemma, a question of international law versus political reality.
Definitely something to keep thinking about. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.